Okay, so we just added our unit test target to the project. So now let's actually look at creating some unit tests themselves. So the objective here is so that you can implement those tests using XCTestCase and the XCTest framework. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is just add a Swift file here in the project itself. So I'm going to make sure that the target is in my app, not the tests here. And I'm just going to call this math. And then maybe we'll just have, oops. So these are in the training kit, the Learn.Lambda School reading content under the follow along section. There are 4 functions, just add, subtract, multiply, divide. So I'm just going to add these functions so that we can then access them. And these are the things that we'll be testing. So now jumping over to the tests themselves, you'll notice that it comes with this tests file. It's sort of up to you whether you want to keep this. This is sort of like the viewcontroller.swift file in that it's just generic. It's just, you know, the name of your project plus tests. That's great for the target, but for the actual tests themselves, in any complicated app, you're going to have, you know, more than kind of one group of things that you're going to want to test. So for example, we have like the math, and we can make a math tests file where maybe you have something else that's related to core data and you want to test that, or whatever it is. You would kind of make separate test case files for each of them just to keep it clean. Not that it's going to affect it performance-wise in any way. So I'm just going to move this to the trash though, and just go File, New File. And then I'm going to add this unit test case class. And it should be a subclass of XCTestCase. Just leave that as it is. It should be that anyway. But if it isn't, just go ahead and put it to that. And then just call it something descriptive. So for this one, I'll just call it math tests. That's what we'll be testing. And you should notice that it should add it to the tests target, not the application target. So the thing about, oh yeah, and I'm not sure why this is still doing it. If it asks to configure an Objective-C bridging header, just hit Don't Create. Not really sure why it's asking that. We're not using Objective-C at all, so don't worry about that. Okay, so a couple things with this is, since we are in a different target, what that means is when we go ahead and, you know, build our app, we don't also have to run the tests or build the tests, and vice versa. What can be really cool about this is we could run, I mean, in a large app, you would maybe have hundreds of unit tests that test, you know, different parts of your app, just small pieces, and you can very, very quickly run all of the unit tests at once without having to go ahead and pull up the simulator and, you know, wait for everything to load and everything. Now that works for unit tests. The UI tests are a little bit different, and you'll learn why tomorrow. But these are all separate, so it doesn't, you know, bloat up your app when you try to put this on the App Store with the test, because it only takes the things in your application target, not the tests themselves. And that's also another benefit of using tests themselves in a separate target with XCTest, and not, you know, just like we were looking at in this in the playground, where it's just kind of a part of your app that you write your own test functions for. And we're going to leverage XCTest, which is great. So let's just look at a couple things that it comes with. The biggest 2 things here are the setup and tear down. Now, when you're testing your app, you may need to set up a state in a specific way or something, and you could do that in the setup function. So like it says here, the method's called before the invocation of each test method in the class. So for every test, this gets called, oops, and then for every test, the teardown gets called. So if you have 100 tests, setup will run before each one, and teardown will run before or after each one. So you can set up whatever state you need to there, which can be nice. In our case, we don't need to do anything, so we can just delete that. This test example is just an example test that's empty. And you'll notice it has this this diamond here with a play. That's representing a test. So the way that that works is anything that you want to be a test in here, you put test before or as the very first word in the function, and then it knows that, okay, this is a test. So you could have helper methods or whatever you want in here that aren't tests, but just sort of help the tests run. And then you can just perform or measure the performance of a specific test. We're not really going to worry about that right now. So just to start with, we'll look at creating our own test. So the first thing I want to do is look at XCTest here. I'm just going to pull it up in the documentation. So XCTest is kind of the overarching thing that holds everything related to testing. It says create and run unit tests, performance tests, and UI tests for your Xcode project. So we'll focus on unit tests right now. The big thing that we'll use with XCTest is this XCTestCase and something else that we'll talk about in the next video. But this test case says it's the primary class for defining test cases, test methods, and performance tests. So that's what we have right here. So any tests that we want to write should be within an XCTestCase or a subclass of it. So let's go ahead and maybe make a function called func test sum. That's just going to test the sum method. Now here's the thing. If we wanted to approach, we're just going to approach this similar to the way that we did with the playground with the power function. We're not actually going to write a true, well, I suppose this is a true test, but not leveraging everything that XCTest has to give to us. We'll talk about that in the next video, but just kind of to ease you in, we'll just write a very simple case. Now, if we were to run this test right now, we actually could. Let's see what happens. So it's going to give us a check mark or an X depending on whether it passes or fails. Okay, and it says test succeeded. So what happened here? Well, we're not actually testing anything. So the way that this essentially works is if the test gets to the end of the function of the test itself without something failing, then it says, okay, the test passed, nothing bad happened, so it assumes that the test passes. So we'll kind of look at why the way that we did it previously with the power function doesn't quite work. So we could just maybe say, x equals 10 and y equals 32, and then we could hit sum. And you'll notice we don't actually get access to that sum method that we have in the math Swift file. The problem here is these are two different targets, and if you've never really learned about target membership, this math.swift file is only exposed to, it's only a part of our iOS app, not the tests target, which is the way that it should be. The way that we import essentially any code in our actual application is through just the import like you've seen before. So we would say import some project, but then it doesn't appear. What we need to do instead is do @testable import some project, and what that does, it says, well, normally when you're importing a framework like XCTest or UIKit or something, you only get access to the headers, which is normal. But for testing, we want to say, yeah, we want to actually access the internal things in our project, not just the publicly available things to external sources. Oh, and it's not showing up because we need to, let's just put this in a class here. We'll just call this math. We'll just make these static functions instead. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry. So now if we were to say math there we go. That's weird. Then we could say add x and y. Whoops, probably should have made those a and b. Let me do that real quick. A, b, there we go. So we could say let result equal that. Okay. So now we could say, well, what do we expect the result to be? It should be 42. So we could say if result equals 42, then we know, again, the test passed, else, whoops, the test failed. So here's the thing. So if we run this again, it's going to say the test succeeded, which is great. But now if we were to change this to not be something that is 42, it's still going to say that it succeeds. So in the next video, we'll look at why this is occurring and how to fix this.